Hi everyone, this is Chris from A Bar Above, and today we're going to be tasting through a couple different styles of Genever and explaining some of the key differences between this product and let's say, a London dry style gin. So stay tuned. So recently we've been doing a lot of research on spirits and spirit families and kind of subcategories within spirit families for a course that we're going to be teaching here soon. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was the area of gin and kind of some of the different subcategories of gin that are out there. Now, I remember the first time I tried Genever, I really didn't know what to do with the spirit. It just kind of threw off my palate and I didn't really understand kind of what was going on in the glass. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to talk about Genever and compare it to London dry style gin, which is the most common style of gin that we work with. Tanqueray, Bombay, all these are London dry style gins. Let's talk about just gin in general. The modern style is London dry style gin, and brands like Tanqueray, Bombay Dry, these are iconically London dry style gins. It's what we typically mix with. So with London dry style gins, what you typically start off with is a neutral grain spirit, typically a high proof vodka. You steep all your botanicals in there, with juniper being the most dominant flavor. You run it through the still, and what comes out is a high proof gin. That's a general idea, just kind of what's happening, but that's kind of the gist of London dry style gin. So what you're left with is a really botanically driven, really lean alcohol with not a lot of body or weight to it. Now with Genever, the old style of Genever, what you start off with traditionally is a high malt wine content. So right there you already know that it's going to have a lot more weight on the palate. Now Genever actually has two main categories within it. You have a young style and you have an old style. And this isn't a reference to how long it's spent in wood or barrels. It's actually how it's being manufactured. So with the young style, it's actually the newer style, obviously, and you have much lower malt content to the spirit. So typically it can go all the way up to about 15% malt content. And not really dominated by juniper. Juniper is definitely a part of it, but it doesn't come through like a London dry style juniper. It doesn't kind of hit you over the head with it. So the young Genever, this one here is Bachma's Young Grand Genever, and the Grand Genever is a reference to a high grain content. I believe this is actually 100% grain. Now with a grain-driven alcohol, you get a lot more kind of a crisp, clean, focused alcohol than you would with something like this one, which has a much higher malt content to it. So this spirit in general, just tasting it and smelling it, first of all, it's only 35% alcohol, so it drinks really easy and it sips really easy. So you're not going to have the sharp kind of aggressive alcohol like you get from a lot of the London dry style gins. Now with the flavor of it, you get a lot of kind of savory components to it as well. So it kind of has a richness on the palate, like kind of a butteriness or kind of like a nuttiness to it as well. There's a little bit of citrus in there also, but not too much. It's actually a really, really fun spirit just to kind of sip. So that's the basics of young Genevers. So a lot more clean focused, and if I was going to work it into a cocktail, I would probably try to substitute it somewhere between a vodka and a gin. It's kind of like baby steps into gin, basically. So the old style Genever has a much higher malt wine content, like I mentioned before, and it comes through in a spirit. Now this is only about 35% alcohol as well, so it's very easy to drink and very easy to sip. Now one of the things you'll notice immediately is just the color difference between the two. The old Genever kind of has this really cool kind of pale straw color to it, where the Grand Genever is very, very clear like vodka. And the smell is very, very different as well. With this old Genever, every time I smell it, I get this kind of picture of pineapple upside down cake. You get that tropical kind of acidity note to it, and you kind of have that weight of like a sweet cake almost on the palate and on the nose. Now, this spirit drink's really nice just on its own. It does have much more of a weight to it than the other style of the Grand Genever, the young Grand Genever. And it lives in this weird world, if you want to put it into a cocktail, it lives in this weird world of kind of between a really light style whiskey and kind of a heavier weight gin. So imagine like a Plymouth gin that isn't so focused on the juniper and add a little bit of weight to it, or like a really light Canadian whiskey that has kind of this weird funky thing going on with it. It kind of lives in that weird area. So with this product, it makes a lot of sense to use it in really spirit-driven cocktails since it has so much character. And it's a kind of an easy thing to do to swap this thing into a Negroni, because if you use bourbon, you have a Boulevardier. If gin, obviously you have a Negroni. So it would fit really well in that particular style. So there you have it. We've tasted both styles of Genever and compared them against a London dry style gin. We've also given a couple recommendations on how to utilize them and substitute them into cocktails. Now, I will say one last thing about Genever, and that is for any of you that have a pre-prohibition kind of focus, which is very popular these days, Genever was the dominant style of gin back then. So, you know, if you dust off all those classic cocktail books, which I know we all have lying around, try incorporating Genever into those drinks instead of a London dry style gin. It's going to take the cocktail in a completely different direction, and it's probably going to be a little bit more true to the original recipe. So I hope you guys found this interesting, and we'll definitely do some other spirit category tastings in the future. But until then, I hope you guys have a great shift, and cheers. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Google+, or visit us at abarabove.com.